Our next speaker is Brian Cox, principal of Johnson Junior High School.
Good evening, folks. I'm also here representing the Wyoming Association of Secondary School Principals, and I'd like to speak to three main talking points. One is actually the arming of staff members in our public schools, and on top of that, creating positive school climates within our buildings, and the need for increased mental health support. Many of the concerns brought forward to me with arming staff members in a school tend to center around rural communities where law enforcement can have delayed response times or limited personnel to respond. This can be a very true case in many areas of Wyoming as well as around the country. However, this is one solution to a problem when we talk about arming teachers, but I would suggest that it be a very delayed response to this issue. When arming teachers becomes the immediate discussion point, we tend to bypass the glaring safety concerns present within each building that allow active shooters access. Rural communities face decreased funding due to their student enrollment size, and thus many rural communities suffer from having lacking security systems such as cameras and A-phone systems that allow active shooters entrance to buildings. Additionally, few buildings, either rural or urban, have designed entry systems that only allow visitors one access point into the main office. These are areas that can then easily be addressed in schools immediately before we've even mentioned the issue of bringing weapons into schools. I'd like to make the point that more weapons in schools truly increases the access to weapons for both pros and cons. I'd hesitate if a small principal, one of my assistants is 5 foot and 100 pounds. At a high school level setting, if we had a student of large size, could easily take a weapon from someone just as that, and she actually is a concealed carry permit holder. With that, when we talk about firearms in schools, we would ascertain that this should only be limited to our SROs and law enforcement personnel. As teachers, we are trained in our content area and the developmental characteristics of children. We are not trained in the use of firearms and their applications. Asking school personnel to do the job of law enforcement and military personnel is nothing short of asking your plumber to cut your hair. It's just not the job you'd want them to do. Furthermore, asking staff members to determine a threat, acquire the threat, approach the threat, and then eliminate the threat is much more in-depth training needed than a simple hunter safety course. The second point I'd like to make is the principal's role in building a positive school climate. It's the principal's job to build that in each and every school in our communities. As a school principal, I would ask each of you to reflect on what perceptions you would have dropping your son or daughter off to a school and seeing the school personnel wearing bulletproof vests. I would imagine that you would most likely find a different schooling option for your own student. I would then ask you that if staff members wearing bulletproof vests was to cause an ill feeling in your stomach, at what point does a staff member wearing a firearm ease that sense of discomfort? Both of these should send a concern that the community and that school is an unsafe environment for your child to thrive academically. This discussion is fraught with emotion. Emotion is the byproduct of caring deeply about an issue, and I'm not sure that there is an issue for any parent that's more deep than that of their children. I ask you then, how does the climate of schooling change when IEP meetings, contentious discipline hearings, or athletic events now have a heated component of firearms present throughout the building? These are issues that keep principals up at night when access to firearms in the school settings become present. Lastly, I would just mention that I'd urge the time, energy, and money being spent to focus on this be spent better on mental health issues and increasing the amount of social workers and psychologists that schools and communities have access to. Here in Wyoming, the access to support for students with mental illness is very limited. Many times it is reduced to a 10-day stint at an institution where they subsequently return to school with little plan of action moving forward. This then places schools in a position of trying to fulfill another role for society without appropriate resources, training, and personnel to handle it. This is in no way a simple issue, and it is complex and multifaceted. The issue of arming staff members in our school creates further danger for our students. We are charged to grow and develop. I applaud the efforts of this task force and the effort taken to begin the discussion around our country, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Cox.